Adding a button to the header, as I wanted here, such a navigation button, requires a bit of extra work initially, but thereafter is very straightforward. We first of all need to install an extra package to make that easier, because theoretically you have a lot of power here. You can add such buttons with the help of the navigation options. So here on the meal detail screen, besides setting a header title, you can set header left and header right to add buttons on the left of the right of the title. Typically you want to use right because the left is reserved for the back button. And generally you can simply return a JSX element there. So you can simply set this to text like favorite. That is something you could do here. And actually, let me show this to you and therefore restart the server before we use a package. Because whilst you can just add a component here, getting the styling right, the positioning right for all the different platforms, especially if you're not just using text here, but also maybe an icon, which you typically want to have there, that can be really cumbersome. And that's why we'll install an extra package that makes that way easier than it otherwise is. So let me restart this with npm start, not npm install, npm start. And with it running again, let's reload this here on iOS, and let me show you what we have here now that I render a text. You see this text here. So this is getting rendered, but as I said, having the right padding, the right alignment, the right style, the right size, super annoying if you do it all on your own, because you're not just doing this for one device, but for many devices. That's why we'll actually install a special package here, which helps us with this. So quit the process for now, the running dev process, and use npm install --save and install the react-navigation-header-buttons package, which is a package that helps you, surprisingly, if you have a look at the name, with setting up some buttons in your header, so in that top toolbar here. This is a package which then will make it really easy to add such buttons. With it added, I'll restart my development server with npm start, and now I'll create a new helper component myself in the components folder, which I'll name helper header button, not helper, header button. There, I'll import React from React, because this will be a normal React component which we create in there, and import something from this new React navigation header buttons package we just installed, and that something which I import is header button. Besides that, let's also import something from @expo/vector icons, which should be available, but just to be super safe, you can definitely also run npm install --save @expo/vector icons to install this package as well, because you'll need that. And the thing we need to import from that package is icons. Of course, you can use any icons that you want. I covered icons earlier in this course, and you're free to use any icon you want in your header button. I'll just work with icons because I use them in the rest of this course as well. But again, you can use any icons you want. And of course, in the header, you don't have to use icons. You could use other text as well, but typically you do use icons, of course. That's what users typically are used to from, well, other apps. In addition, I'll also import colors from constants colors, and now create my component here. And that's the, let's say, custom header button, or just header button, whatever you want to name it, but we're already importing this, so we have to pick a different name here to not have a name clash. And this will receive some props and will return the header button we're getting from this package which we installed. But we'll soon add some extra configuration, which is why I'm wrapping this in a separate component, so that we don't have to repeat that configuration for every button we're using anywhere in the app. And then, of course, I'll export my default custom header button. So now this header button I'm using here from this package we installed, that will, first of all, receive all props we're getting with this nice little trick we can use in React, where we forward all props with this shortcut by pulling out all the key value pairs and passing them to this object, which this component in the end is. So that's the first thing. We need to forward all the props, and that's super important. Don't forget this, otherwise it will not work correctly. The second step is that we add the icon component prop with a capital I. That's a prop the header button we're getting from this package expects. And there I pass in Ionicons. So this expects a vector icon package, which can be used for rendering icons. Doesn't have to be Ionicons, but has to be from either @expo vector icons or from the underlying React Native vector icons package on which the expo package is based on. And you can also pass in an icon size, and I will standardize this so that all my header buttons across the entire app have the same size of 23, which I found to work quite well. Last but not least, I'll also set up a color here, and I'll use my primary color, though, of course, we have to make sure that we differentiate by platform. So I'll also import platform from React Native. Because on Android, our header will have the primary color as a background. So there we want to use an icon color of white. So here I'll check platform OS. If that's equal to Android, then I want to use white here. And only if it's iOS, I want to use the primary color. So now we have that pre-configured header button. Now we can use that in the place in the component where we want to add it to our header. And that's the meal detail screen in this case. There, we now need to import something else from the newly installed package. So from React Navigation header buttons, from this package, here we have to install or import header buttons. So not header button, which we used in the other file, but header buttons, plural. We add this here because now, down there, where we set up the navigation options for this component, instead of using our text component there, I want to use header buttons, this component I just added the import for, and wrap this around another element we have to import from React Navigation header buttons, and that's item. Item is another component we import, which we can now use between the opening and closing tags of the header buttons. So here we add item. And item is a self-closing component where we describe the icon we want to render in the end. We can also give this a title, which would be rendered as a fallback, and I'll name this favorite, but we normally won't see this. Instead here, I can also set up an icon name, and now this should be, for example, iOS star, which is a valid Ionicons icon, and you can search that expo vector icons list I showed you earlier in the course, which you'll also find attached to this video, for possible icons you can use here. Just make sure that you use an icon from the icon set you used in your header button. So in my case, from Ionicons. Now this indicates which icon to use. Now here we can also add on press to register a function that should be triggered when that icon is pressed or when that item in the header is pressed. And for now, I'll just say mark as favorite here, log this in the console so that we see that this worked. We're not entirely there yet because we're not using our custom header button. That's the last missing piece. We need to import this component we created. So import header button from components, and then there from header button. That's the button we worked on. And we pass this to header buttons here because this expects a header button component prop where we point at the component that should be used to render this item in the end. Now, this is all very complex, as you can tell, a lot of nested components. This is just a setup which is a little bit cumbersome the first time you do it, but when you then use it in other components, it's really just all about copying the same setup here, changing the title, changing the icon, and changing the logic, and you're there. So that's all you have to do in the future. It's just the initial setup. That's some extra work here. With all that setup, however, if we now save this, we should be able to see our star here. This is the icon we see, and we can press this, and as I press it, you see mark as favorite is getting logged here in the console. Let's also see that on Android. There we also have the star, and if I press this star here, we also see mark as favorite. So that's working. Little side note I just saw, if we have multiple recipes, we might want some extra styling there, totally unrelated to the header button, just seeing it. So in the meal item.js file, on the meal item, I'll actually add some margin vertical of 10. Again, totally not something you need here, just there to make sure that this looks nicer if we have multiple items. Important thing here, of course, is that we have our header button, this icon. And this is how you can add buttons or items here to your header. And of course, you can add more than one. Here in the meal detail screen, you can have multiple such items between the header buttons here, which you set up on header right on the navigation options. This is how you add items here. You can have more than one. For example, here we could also have iOS star outline, which is another icon which looks a bit different so that we can see the difference. Here, now we have two here. So that's possible. Of course, you shouldn't overload this so that your UI stays clean and just works. But this is how you can add icons here to your screen. By the way, the warning I'm getting here regarding the double keys, the title here is also used as a key for your items. So if you have multiple items, you shouldn't use the same title. But I just added this for demonstration purposes anyways, so I'll simply get rid of it and we're good. Now our star icon doesn't do anything yet. That's something we'll add later, but at least we see it. And that's really important in a module where we talk about navigation and working with the header.